Story 1. I sneezed my back into place after being couchbound for nearly a year and a half. Within 15 minutes, it felt like that year and a half was a distant memory. Story 2. My friend and I were at his house watching television when someone on the screen was eating a strawberry. I don't really care for them, but it looked good. So I asked if, by chance, he had any strawberries in the house. He almost laughed at me. We were two 20-year-olds with a higher chance of having beer, macaroni and cheese, or Fruit Loops than strawberries. About 20 minutes later, there's a knock at the door, and he goes to answer it. He yells out to me to come see something. His mom is standing at the door with one of those low-cut boxes filled with strawberries. He said, "Tell Adrian what you said." She looks a little strange and says, "I was driving home and there was a guy selling strawberries out of the back of his truck. And I thought, I bet David and his friends would like some strawberries." My buddy says, "Well, you blew it. We all have one wish, and you wasted yours on strawberries." Story 3. My dad passed away in 1992. Among other things, I inherited a 1980 Chevrolet light utility vehicle pickup. It may have been through ignorance, but I had looked high and low for 4 bolts that needed replacement on the universal joint. They were special and shouldered. I stopped everywhere looking for these bolts. Chevrolet nor Isuzu had them. I was at my wit's end, as I had been looking for 2 months. One day, a buddy of mine and I stopped at a hamburger joint that had a parts store next to it. We got out and I said I was going to check this parts store, and I had one of the bolts in my hand. As we were walking to the store, a guy that I can only describe as looking like the Jesus your grandmother had a picture of on her wall walked by us and said howdy or something. But here is what freaked me out. He said, "Those look like they are universal joint bolts for a Chevrolet light utility vehicle pickup. I bet you are having a heck of a time." Yes, he said, heck. Finding them. "Come over here, I think I have some in my truck." He walked over to his truck, looked in a 5-gallon bucket, and handed me 4 perfect bolts exactly like I needed. My jaw dropped. I tried to pay him or buy him a hamburger, and he said no, just help someone else out if you get the chance. That was 28 years ago, and I remember it like it was yesterday. Thank you for the awards and all, but thanks for the replies. I swear this is a true story and happened just like I said. I don't talk as much to the guy that was with me that day, but he always asks if I have run into Jesus Christ lately. Story 4. For about 10 years, a man would call my home, ask for me, and then ask if my feet were ticklish. This was 30 or so years ago with no caller ID or anything like that. I would engage him if my family was home. If I said my feet were ticklish, he'd ask me to get the person sitting closest to me to tickle them. He always hung up before we could ask questions to figure him out. Sometimes he'd catch me on a payphone. For example, I'd be walking home from school, and a payphone would ring. It was always him. I still don't know who it was. Story 5. Didn't happen to me, but to my mom. She was going through a tough patch, not making a lot of money. She was a single mom with 2 kids, stressed over bills, but had just enough to cover them. Unfortunately, it left us with no money. She was a hard worker and would do multiple shifts at the hospital. Still, it was hard this particular month. She was sweeping and prayed for help. As she turned around to empty the dustbin into the trash, there was a crisp $100 bill perfectly laying on top of the filled trash can. No one lived at our house with us. She was never able to explain it. Story 6. My youngest daughter would always beg to buy the seasonal decorations when we went shopping. She passed away from a brain tumor when she was 5, and as a way to cope, I started buying those seasonal decorations and now decorate my house with them as the seasons and holidays change. Her favorite was these colorful birds from Target. A couple of years ago, just before Easter, I was deep cleaning the house. One of the Easter birds went missing. I assumed one of my older kids had knocked it off the shelf with their backpack as they left for school that morning. I looked around where it should have fallen, but couldn't find it. We had a younger dog who loved to chew up everything he could find. I checked all his usual hiding spots but couldn't find it. I continued to clean the house. Vacuum, dust, full top-to-bottom cleaning of the common areas of the house since I was home alone for the day. Finally, I'm done and still haven't found that bird. I found a lot of missing socks, Legos, and other items. I grabbed my cleaning stuff and said out loud, "It's okay if you're playing with it, but will you let me know somehow so that I know the dog didn't destroy it?" I walked out of the living room and put the cleaning stuff away under the kitchen sink. I came back into the living room, and there that bird was. It was standing on its feet in the center of the living room floor. These birds have pipe cleaner-like feet, so they were difficult to get to stand right, and it was standing on its feet. I got a chill. I picked it up and looked it over. There weren't any teeth marks or slobber, so it hadn't been in the dog's mouth. I just said, "Thanks. You're welcome to play with it whenever you want," and put it back on the shelf. I have no way to explain it other than the paranormal. Story 7. I had a dream one night that a former coworker, whom I rarely interact with, was pregnant. In the dream, I was back at my old office, and they were explaining to me that I was going to fill in for her. I was very alarmed and thought, "Oh heck no. I left you all last year and went to a new place." She came up and was very pregnant and said, "Oh come on. It's just while I'm on leave." I told my husband because it was weird, and we joked about how awful it would be for me to have gotten out of that workplace just to have to go back. Maybe a week later, I dreamed about a different friend whom I rarely speak with being pregnant as well. The next week, I run into my former coworker somewhere and joke about the funny dream I had where she was pregnant. She tells me she is, and they haven't told anyone yet, as she's waiting. I laugh it off and later tell my husband about it. He jokes and says, "Didn't you dream another friend was pregnant? You should give her a call." It's even funnier because my other friend is my age and, like me, has older children. We're way too old to be starting over. I laugh it off. The next day, as an afterthought, while I'm bored and driving a long distance, I call my other friend about the funny dream and my husband's joke that I should call her. Turns out she is also pregnant, and they haven't told anyone because they're having ultrasounds and amnios first due to her age and all. Completely crazy. Story 8. A week before my twin brother died, I was in the passenger seat of the car, and an awful thought with visuals popped into my mind. I was at his house and it was empty. His door was shut, but I had an overwhelming feeling he was no longer alive. It was the first time I cried over just a thought. I also had him visit me in a dream afterward and ask where he was, and he didn't know he was dead yet. I showed him his death certificate and all the paperwork my mom was filling out. I can't explain it, but seeing that a week ahead helped me process his death better than my siblings and mom. His 10-year anniversary is coming up in March, and I've been trying to dream about him with no luck. Story 9. Years ago, when my wife was pregnant with our second child and about to give birth, my mom came to stay with us for a few days to help take care of our oldest child. One early evening, my mom asked for a pen, paper, and an envelope. When I gave them to her, she wrote on the paper, sealed it in the envelope, and gave it to me, saying, "Put this in your pocket and don't open it. You'll know when," she said. 30 minutes later, my wife announced it was time to go to the hospital. She was in labor. So we did. And about 9 hours later, our second daughter was born at 3:45 a.m. She weighed 8 pounds, 11 ounces, and was 20 inches long. This being before cell phone days, I called my mom from the hospital to tell her the news. She answered the phone and immediately said, "Before you say anything, open the envelope." I did. It said, "Girl, 3:45 a.m., 8 pounds, 11 ounces, 20 inches. I kept that paper for years. When my mom died, I went to our document safe where we kept it, but it was gone. Story 10. Living in a dorm, no roommate. Night before a 2-hour open book final, I put my book in the middle of the floor so I'll stumble over it on the way out. The floor has nothing else on it. In the morning, it's gone. I look all over the room, can't find it. I think I'm hysterically blind, so I feel over every inch of the floor with my hands. Nothing. I go get a cup of coffee and come back. Still nothing. By now, there's only 1 hour for the test. I go anyway and do the best I can. Naturally, when I get back, the book is in the middle of the floor exactly where I put it. Probably a prank. But how? I'm not that heavy a sleeper. Nobody took credit for it. Story 11. My family used to travel between Utah and Nevada a few times a year when I was growing up. We often saw wildlife on the side of the road or crossing the road. There's one thing that still baffles all of us, though. It was in the middle of the day, on a long, hot, empty stretch of road. I was a teen. Myself, my mom, and a couple of my siblings saw something scurry across the road. It looked like a huge egg, the size of an ostrich egg, maybe larger, with two skinny legs and feet poking out the bottom of it. We cannot figure out what it possibly could have been. Story 12. Not exactly seen, but it's strange. I was around 6 years old, and on a Wednesday evening I went to bed. I woke up, and it was Friday. I remember asking my mom why it was Friday when yesterday it was Wednesday. She said yesterday was Thursday, obviously. I asked her what I did on Thursday because the last thing I remember is going to sleep on Wednesday. She named some activities, and I remembered none of that. I never found out why I don't remember Thursday. Story 13. Oh, shoot. I have one. When I was a kid, I was awfully sick at one point, completely bedridden. I was super hungry or something, so I wanted to go get my mom. I fell out of bed, but I couldn't move after that. I was just sort of worming around in agony until for, I want to say hippies, tie-dye shirts, baggy bell-bottom pants, long hair. They just appeared in my room, and I instinctively knew they were in a band. One of them was like, "Yo, dude, your mom's asleep. Want us to go get her?" So I just mutely nodded. They disappeared, and a few minutes later, my mom came up and checked on me. Story 14. I was dating a girl eons ago, and she left my house one night after hanging out to go home. She called my house about 10 minutes later because she had curbed her car trying to not hit a dog that looked like a ghost. I was annoyed, thought she was full of it, helped her unlock her steering wheel, and she was on her way. Years later, I was riding with a completely separate, unrelated girlfriend, and I was looking down at some CDs in my lap to try and figure out what to play next. Out of the blue, she yelled, "Look!" And then she locked the brakes up and we slid to a stop. I asked, "What are you doing?" And she responded, "Did you not see that dog run right in front of us? It looked like a ghost wolf." I looked around, and sure enough, we were right around the same spot where my previous girlfriend had also seen this ghost canine, wolf thing, which freaked me out once that clicked. So while I technically never saw it myself, the inexplicable, ethereal canine freaked out two different girlfriends of mine, and none of us have a clue as to what it actually was. Story 15. I saw a man walk down the sidewalk and stop at one of the free newspaper stands, open it, and pull out a spatula, then turn around and walk back in the other direction. If he was homeless, it would have made sense. But the man was dressed in clean and pressed business casual clothes and had perfect hair and a clean shave. Story 16. So in 2013, I was smoking a cigarette with my buddy and his schizophrenic neighbor in Denton, Texas. This neighbor was the nice kind of off, never acting mean or violent. So we were actually pretty good friends. Anyway, during the middle of the cigarette, the neighbor acts like he just got hit with an energy wave and runs out into the yard. He begins to start rhythmically dancing and chanting about the meteor. What I could understand was that he felt the meteor, and he said that he felt it falling, and then with a final jerk, he said the meteor had exploded. At that same time, on the other side of the world, an enormous meteor exploded over Russia. If you are wondering, no, there was no advanced warning. And yes, part of me does suspect that he somehow knew. Story 17. Doing some door-to-door work, I knocked on a house I'd only driven past in a city on the other side of the world from where I grew up. As I looked around the deck I was standing on, I noticed a particular window had a view through another window. I distinctly remembered all the details of what was outside the second window, even though I had never before seen it in my life. As the door opened, the lady standing at it gave a bewildered face that I must have mirrored. The first thing she says is, "I know you. I promise, there is no way our paths had previously crossed." As we got to talking, I was sharing a personal story, of which she finished the last details for me. I was stunned, and she said, "I'm sure you've told me that before." I was tripping out and ended up coming back to the house a few times to just chat and see where or if anyone we both knew had crossed paths. To this day, I still can't explain it. Story 18. My dad had a really complicated case of thrombosis. It was so bad that only 2 hospitals in the country were equipped to handle it. Long story short, he was in intensive care and had to be airlifted to the most famous hospital in Brazil. This process took the whole night. I remember my mom telling me at 6 in the morning that he was stable and the visitation time would be about 7 hours away, so I went to get some sleep. I don't remember specific details, just a very obvious loving figure that sounded just like my grandpa. His dad, who was already deceased, telling me to relax and that it was not my father's time. When visiting time came, due to my good mood and spirit, my dad asked me if I understood what he had since the doctor told us his chances of recovery were slim. Then I told him about the dream. He cried and hugged me. He spent over 10 days in the intensive care unit and over a month in recovery, but is healthy and happy today. Never had my grandpa or anyone else visit me before or since.